The autumn sun filtered through the worn curtains of their small apartment in Brooklyn, casting golden streaks across the modest living room. Sarah Mitchell stood at the kitchen counter, her hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee, watching her 7-year-old daughter Emma color at the dining table. The girl's tongue poked out slightly as she concentrated on staying within the lines of her drawing. A family, Sarah noticed, with 3 people: herself, Emma, and a figure with a crown. Sarah smiled softly, though it carried the weight of years spent juggling impossible schedules. She worked 2 jobs, mornings as a data analyst at a mid-sized financial firm, and evenings as a freelance graphic designer. The income covered their rent in this cramped neighborhood barely, and left little room for the luxuries other families took for granted. Yet Emma never complained. The girl had inherited her mother's resilience, the ability to find joy in small things. A rainy day meant watching movies under a blanket fort, and a successful test at school meant celebrating with hot chocolate from the bodega on the corner. The morning routine began like clockwork. Sarah helped Emma into her school uniform, a burgundy dress with a white collar that the child loved despite its modest cost from a thrift store. They rode the subway together, Emma holding tight to her mother's hand as they navigated the crowded platform. The city moved around them with indifference, millions of people chasing their own dreams, their own survival. At school, Sarah knelt down to kiss Emma's forehead. "Have the best day, baby. I'll pick you up at 3:30, and remember we're having your favorite mac and cheese for dinner. With the fancy kind of cheese." Emma's dark eyes, inherited from her father, a man Sarah had loved once but who had chosen a different path, sparkled with hope. "The fancy kind," Sarah promised, knowing she'd skip lunch to afford it. The office building where Sarah worked was a glass and steel structure in Manhattan, a world away from her neighborhood. Her desk occupied a corner cubicle on the 23rd floor, overlooking the city she loved despite its cruelty. Her colleague Marcus, who sat at the desk beside hers, was already there, scrolling through emails with the frantic energy of someone perpetually late. "Rough morning?" he asked, glancing at her. "When is morning ever not rough?" Sarah replied, logging into her computer. She had 3 projects due by Friday, an inbox with 57 unread messages, and exactly 4 hours before she needed to leave to pick up Emma from after-school care. It was 10:47 a.m. when the office descended into controlled chaos. The company's CEO, James Harrington III, a man Sarah had seen only twice in her 18 months at the firm, had decided to visit their department. He swept through with his assistant, observing teams, asking pointed questions about productivity and innovation. Sarah kept her head down, focusing on her spreadsheet, but something made her look up. James Harrington was not what she expected. The media portrayed him as cold, a ruthless businessman in his mid-40s who had multiplied his family's wealth through shrewd investments and an uncanny ability to spot market trends. But his eyes held something else, a kind of weariness that spoke of responsibility without joy. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, and his dark hair, graying at the temples, was immaculately styled. He paused at her desk. "What are you working on?" His voice was calm, measured. Sarah straightened, suddenly aware of her thrift store blouse with the small stain she'd tried to hide. "A market analysis for the Lakeside project, Mr. Harrington. We're projecting a 12% growth if we adjust the timing of our entry into the commercial property sector." He studied the screen, then looked at her. "Your recommendation?" "Adjust the timing," she said clearly. "Risk analysis suggests we're moving too fast. Patience here pays off better than momentum." Something flickered across his face. Respect, perhaps. "Interesting. Most people your age are more aggressive. Most people my age don't have anyone depending on them to make smart decisions," Sarah replied quietly, then caught herself. She was speaking to the CEO. I just think through all angles before recommending anything significant." He nodded slowly. "Good instinct. Keep me updated on that analysis." He moved on. But Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a small awareness that she'd been truly seen, if only for a moment. The day continued, as it always did. Sarah worked through lunch, replied to client emails while eating a protein bar at her desk, and left precisely at 2:50 p.m. to catch the subway to Emma's school. Her daughter was waiting on the concrete steps, her backpack slightly askew, a drawing clutched in her hand. "Mommy!" Emma crashed into her with the force of someone who'd been separated for years, not merely 6 hours. That evening, Sarah made Emma's favorite dinner. They ate at their small table, Emma swinging her legs beneath the chair, talking about her day. Her friend Sophie had gotten a new pencil case, Tommy had accidentally knocked over the paint cups during art class, and Mrs. Chen had read them a story about a girl who solved mysteries. "Mommy, can I solve mysteries?" Emma asked, milk mustache adorning her upper lip. "You solve mysteries every day, baby. You figured out how to get me to agree to fancy cheese for dinner, didn't you?" Emma giggled, and Sarah felt the familiar ache, the bittersweet awareness that this was her life now. Beautiful and full of love, but marked by the constant anxiety of financial uncertainty. She'd gone to college, worked hard, made smart decisions, yet here she was, one medical emergency away from disaster, one missed paycheck from catastrophe. Later, as she tucked Emma into bed, reading her the chapter from the book Mrs. Chen had started, Sarah made a silent promise. Someday they'd have more. Someday Emma would have the stability she deserved. Someday Sarah would breathe without the weight of worry on her chest. She didn't know that someday was beginning to take shape in ways she couldn't have imagined. She didn't know that a conversation with a tired businessman about market timing would lead to opportunities she'd never dared dream about. She didn't know that her resilience, her strength, her quiet determination would become the foundation of a love story that would change everything. For now, she simply held her daughter close, whispered, "I love you," into the darkness, and prepared herself for tomorrow, another day of survival, another day of hope. 3 weeks passed. Sarah hadn't thought much about her brief encounter with James Harrington until her supervisor, Patricia, called her into her office on a Tuesday morning. The Lakeside project analysis had been approved, not just approved, but championed as innovative and forward-thinking by the executive board. The company was moving forward with her recommendation, and they wanted her to lead the expansion strategy. "You've been promoted," Patricia said, handing her a folder with the details. "Senior analyst, significant raise, and you'll be working directly with Mr. Harrington's office on implementation." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she took the folder. This was the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed about, the kind that could change everything. Her mind immediately calculated. The raise would mean she could finally afford a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, a better school for Emma, medical insurance without the astronomical deductibles. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely steady. "Thank you so much." "You earned it," Patricia said with a smile. "Your analysis was exceptional. Just don't let it go to your head. Harrington doesn't tolerate mediocrity, but he rewards brilliance. Make sure you keep delivering." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah's life took on a new rhythm. She began attending meetings on the 31st floor, in the executive corridor with its mahogany paneling and windows overlooking Central Park. It was a different world, one where people knew her name, where her opinions mattered, and James Harrington, despite his reputation, treated her with a professional respect that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Their first real working meeting took place on a Friday afternoon. Sarah had prepared meticulously, bringing 3 different projections, backup data, and contingency plans. They met in his office, a space that managed to be both imposing and oddly warm. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the sprawling city below. His desk was organized but not sterile. A framed photo sat on one corner, partially turned away from view, but Sarah caught a glimpse of a young child. "Walk me through your strategy," James said, settling into his leather chair. He had removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. There was something vulnerable about the gesture, as if he was willing to work alongside her, rather than from behind a barrier of formality. Sarah spent the next hour presenting her analysis. James asked intelligent questions, probed her assumptions, pushed her to defend her positions. It wasn't adversarial. It felt collaborative, like two people trying to solve a puzzle together. "You've thought of everything except one thing," he said finally, leaning back in his chair. Sarah's stomach dropped. "What's that?" "The human factor. Properties like these displace people. Working-class families who've lived in those neighborhoods for generations. You have the numbers, the projections, the profit margins. But have you considered the social impact?" Sarah hadn't. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. He was right. "I'll look into community impact assessments," she said. "We could partner with local organizations, maybe offer relocation support, job training programs." "Exactly," James said, a slight smile crossing his features. "That's why I wanted you leading this. Most people would have moved forward without considering the human side, but you think in layers." As the meeting concluded and Sarah gathered her materials, James said, "How old is your daughter?" The question, seemingly random, caught her off guard. She looked up. His expression was open, genuinely curious. "7, Sarah said carefully. "How did you—" "You mentioned it the day I visited your department. You said most people your age don't have someone depending on them. I assumed you did. I was right, apparently." He stood, moving to the window. "It's not easy raising a child alone in this city. I know something about that." "You have children?" Sarah asked, then felt heat rise in her cheeks. That was overstepping. 3, James said, still gazing out at the city. "Alexander is 16. Emma—" He paused, glancing back at her with an odd expression. "My youngest is also Emma. She's 8. And there's Michael, who's 14. From that's—" Sarah fumbled for appropriate words. "Different mothers, yes. I was married twice. The first marriage produced Alexander and Michael. The second was complicated. Emma's mother and I never married, but we have shared custody." He turned back to face her. "I say this not as a personal confession, but as context. I understand the challenges of single parenthood. I'm not immune to the struggles of it, even with my resources." There was a melancholy to his words, a hint of regret beneath the surface. Sarah saw, for just a moment, beneath the polished exterior of the powerful CEO, to the man underneath. Someone trying, perhaps not always successfully, to do right by his children. "I hope you'll be able to manage your responsibilities while taking on this expanded role," he continued, his professional demeanor returning. "I'll need you available for some evening meetings as we move forward. I can arrange flexible working hours, additional support, whatever helps you maintain balance." "I appreciate that," Sarah said. "I'll make it work, I always do." Something flickered in his eyes, sadness perhaps, or recognition. "Don't lose yourself in the process of making it work. I see too many talented people burn out before they've had a chance to truly shine." The following Monday, Sarah received an email from his assistant. Mr. Harrington was inviting her to a gala, a charity event supporting youth education initiatives, that Friday evening. She was welcome to bring a guest. It was framed as a networking opportunity, a chance to meet other key figures in the company. Sarah stared at the email for a long time. She didn't own anything appropriate for a gala. She'd have to find a dress, arrange for Emma to stay with her neighbor, calculate the cost of transportation and shoes and everything else. But she also knew this was the kind of opportunity that could accelerate her career further. She called her best friend Denise, a teacher who'd been her rock through every difficult season of motherhood. "He invited me to a gala," Sarah said, hearing the uncertainty in her own voice. "Girl," Denise replied, "that's not an invitation. That's an opportunity. Get yourself a dress and go make moves." Friday evening arrived and Sarah stood in her bedroom, looking at her reflection. The dress was a deep emerald green, modest but elegant, purchased from a department store with a chunk of her signing bonus. Her hair was swept up in an intricate braid that had taken her 45 minutes to perfect while watching YouTube tutorials. For the first time in years, she felt beautiful, not just functional, but genuinely beautiful. Emma was downstairs with Mrs. Chen from the apartment next door, their agreement settled with a promise to babysit Emma for the weekend so Mrs. Chen could visit her sister. The gala was held at a historic mansion on the Upper East Side. Sarah stepped out of the car, hired through the company's account, and felt a wave of imposter syndrome crash over her. Women in couture gowns and men in tuxedos circulated through elegant rooms, adorned with enormous flower arrangements and glittering chandeliers. Silent auction tables displayed artwork and experiences. Vacations, private concerts, dinner with celebrities. James found her within minutes, as if he'd been watching for her arrival. He was stunning in formal wear, a black tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and sharp jawline. His grey eyes held that peculiar intensity they always did, but tonight it felt more personal, more focused. "You came," he said, extending his hand to guide her deeper into the event. "Of course," Sarah replied, trying to mask her nervousness. "Thank you for the invitation. I invited you because I thought you'd find value in the evening. But I'm beginning to think I invited you because I wanted to see you outside the office." The words came out quietly, almost as if he hadn't meant to say them aloud. The evening unfolded in a blur of introductions, conversations about market trends and investment portfolios, silent auction bids for charitable causes. But the most significant moments were when James was beside her, his hand at the small of her back, his attention focused entirely on her, despite the demands of networking around them. Near the end of the evening, they found themselves on a terrace overlooking the gardens. The Manhattan skyline glittered in the distance, and the October air was cool and clean. "This is a different world from where you come from," James said, gesturing at the city below. "It is," Sarah agreed. "But it doesn't feel real yet. I keep waiting to wake up." "It can be real," he said. He turned to face her. "Sarah, I know this is complicated. You work for me, technically, but I can't stop thinking about you. I haven't been able to since you sat at that desk and challenged my assumptions about the Lakeside project." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. "Mr. Harrington—" "James," he corrected gently. "Please, and I know you're not looking for this. You've built a life focused on your daughter, on stability, but I'm asking if you'd be willing to have dinner with me, not as colleagues, as two people exploring whether there might be something here." Every rational part of Sarah's brain screamed caution. He was her boss. He was significantly wealthier and more powerful. Their lives existed in different stratospheres. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw not the CEO, but the man, someone equally lonely, equally searching for connection. "Yes," she whispered, "but only if we do this the right way. No secrets, no pretense, full transparency about everything." "Agreed," James said. "And Sarah, Emma, your daughter, I hope that eventually she's part of this too. If we're going to build something real, I need you to know from the start that my life involves 3 children. They're my priority. They'll always be my priority." "That's one of the reasons I said yes," Sarah admitted. "A man who loves his children the way you clearly love yours, that matters." 6 months into their relationship, Sarah found herself navigating a life she couldn't have scripted if she'd tried. The dinner dates began simply. Italian restaurant in the West Village, a jazz club in Soho, a bookstore cafe where they talked until closing time. But as the weeks progressed, the dates evolved into overnights where James would visit her apartment, bringing Emma ice cream and teaching her to play chess. He'd sit at their worn kitchen table with takeout containers, completely at ease, despite the shabby furniture and the radiator that clanked at odd hours. Emma had adapted to James's presence with the elasticity of childhood. She called him Mr. James at first, then simply James, and eventually, after a conversation with Sarah, had asked if she could call him Uncle James. "Dame," But the truth was more complex than that, and as their relationship deepened, Sarah knew they had to navigate the reality of integrating their families. James's 3 children were a source of both anticipation and anxiety. Alexander, his eldest, was 16 and carried the weight of being the oldest, the one who'd witnessed his father's first divorce and seemed to have constructed emotional armor in response. Michael, 14, was more open but also more guarded, as if trying to figure out who he should be in the wake of his family's complications. Emma, his Emma as Sarah had started thinking of her, was 8 years old, blonde like her father, with his intensity and intelligence. The first family gathering happened on a Saturday at James's penthouse in the Upper West Side. The apartment was everything Sarah's home wasn't. Soaring ceilings, Italian marble, artwork that probably cost more than she'd earn in her lifetime, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. But despite the luxury, it had a lived-in quality. Kids' shoes scattered by the entrance, video game controllers on the coffee table, a basketball hoop visible through one of the windows on the terrace. Emma held Sarah's hand tightly as they entered, her small frame pressed close. "There are a lot of stairs," Emma said softly. She meant the emotional terrain Sarah understood. This was a big step. "I know, baby," Sarah whispered, "but we're doing it together." James greeted them at the door, then called out, "Kids, Sarah and Emma are here." Alexander appeared first, tall and lean, with his father's colouring and a skeptical expression. Michael bounded down the hallway with more enthusiasm, already grinning at Emma, who peeked out from behind Sarah's leg. And then came Emma, the other Emma, moving with the cautious curiosity of a child trying to understand who this woman and girl invading her home might be. "Hi," her Emma said shyly to James's Emma. "I'm Emma too." "That's confusing," James's Emma announced with the clarity of childhood. "Which one are you?" "Sarah's Emma," Sarah's daughter said. "I'm Dad's Emma," the other responded. She studied Sarah's Emma critically. "Do you like building things?" Maybe." Sarah's Emma looked up at Sarah for guidance. "She likes art and stories more," Sarah said gently. "I like stories," James's Emma said decisively. "And I like building. We can do both. I can build you something and tell you a story about it." The breaking of ice happened with the simplicity that only children could manage. By the time they moved to the dining room, where James's personal chef had prepared lunch, Sarah's Emma and James's Emma were deep in conversation about the merits of different coloured markers. The adults, James, Sarah, and his oldest 2, were more complex. Alexander asked pointed questions about how long Sarah had been working at the company, seemed to be calculating something with his eyes. Michael, bless him, tried harder, asking Sarah about her interests, trying to be friendly. But there was an underlying tension. This was the first woman James had seriously dated since their mother had moved to Los Angeles, and they were processing what that might mean. Sarah handled it with grace, recognizing their need to protect their father, while respecting their right to skepticism. She asked them questions, listened to their answers, didn't try to be their friend, but treated them with genuine respect. Over dessert, James said carefully, "I want to be transparent about my intentions. Sarah is very important to me. I'm not sure where this goes yet, but I wanted my kids to know her, to start building relationships with her and Emma. That's all. No pressure, no expectations, but honesty." Alexander met his father's eyes. "Are you going to marry her?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. "I don't know yet," James said quietly, glancing at Sarah, "but I'm open to the possibility. The question is whether Sarah would want that." All 3 children looked at Sarah. Sarah's Emma grabbed her hand. "I love your dad," Sarah said clearly, addressing the children, "and I care about all of you. But I'm also not going to rush this or pretend to be something I'm not. We're going to take our time, be honest with each other, and see what happens. Sound fair?" Alexander nodded slowly. "Yeah, that sounds fair." A month later, James asked Sarah to move in. Not marriage, not yet, but a step toward integration. Her lease was almost up anyway, and the apartment they'd found in the Upper West Side was perfect, close to James's penthouse, but with its own entrance, giving them independence while building family connections. The moving day was chaotic. Sarah had accumulated fewer possessions than she'd realized, evidence of a life lived lightly, always prepared for upheaval. But as her furniture and boxes filled the new apartment, it felt like a physical manifestation of something shifting fundamentally. She wasn't just Sarah, the single mother, making do and scraping by. She was becoming part of something larger. Emma adjusted quickly. She had her own room at James's penthouse, decorated with artwork and books. She had Alexander teaching her chess strategies, Michael taking her to movies, and James's Emma as an increasingly close friend, the two of them often building elaborate structures from Lego while creating elaborate narratives. Sarah found herself in a position she'd never quite anticipated, integrated into a complicated, blended family. She attended Alexander's debate competitions, drove Emma to soccer, helped Michael with essays. She wasn't replacing their mothers, but she was becoming someone steady, someone reliable, someone who cared about them without an agenda. What surprised her most was how James was with her family. He'd take Emma to school when Sarah had early meetings. He'd help her with her homework. He'd sit on the couch with both Emmas watching movies, completely unself-conscious about the cuddle pile they'd become. Sarah would watch them from the doorway, marveling at how naturally he'd stepped into this role. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, James and Sarah sat on the terrace of their new apartment, looking out at the city. The lights of Manhattan spread before them like a circuit board of possibility. "I need to tell you something," James said, his hand finding hers. "Something that might change how you see me." Sarah's heart quickened. "Okay. My family isn't just wealthy. We're old money, very old money. Harringtons have been in this country for over 200 years. We have holdings, foundations, real estate all over the world. I've tried to minimize it because I wanted you to know me as a person, not as a symbol of wealth. But increasingly I realize I'm not being fair to you by keeping that secret." "I suspected," Sarah said quietly. "You can't hide that kind of wealth, not really." "I know. But what I need you to understand is that this isn't just about you and me. If we move forward, and I hope we do, there's a whole world that comes with my name. Expectations, social obligations. My family's foundation does significant philanthropic work. There are people counting on legacy money, family traditions, social positions. Are you asking me if I can handle it?" "I'm asking if you want to," James said. He pulled back to look at her fully. "Sarah, I'm falling in love with you. But I need you to go into that knowing exactly what you're falling in love with. I'm not just a person, I'm an institution, a name, a responsibility." "That's not true," Sarah said firmly. "You're a person. Yes, you have all those other things attached to you. But the thing I fell in love with is the man who plays chess with my daughter and asks me about my dreams. The man who recognizes talented people and helps them shine. The man who's trying to be a good father to 3 complex children. That's who you are. But you understand what comes next. The social world, the dinners, the galas, eventually the whole public scrutiny of my life." "I understand that it terrifies me," Sarah admitted. "But so does a lot of things that turned out to be worth it." James pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I want to ask you to marry me. Not yet, but soon. When you're ready, when the kids are ready, when we've built more of this foundation together. But I'm telling you now, that's the direction I'm heading." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not from pressure but from the overwhelming realization that she'd somehow crossed over into a different chapter of her life. The single mother struggling to survive had become part of a partnership, part of a family, part of a legacy. "Yes," she whispered, "when the time is right, I want to marry you."